With summer steadily drawing to a close, got a shout from a loyal viewer about treating his old Alfa to a pre-hibernation preen. And with it being the only road-going one of its spec in the country, as well as being built on the same TPO platform as my Fiat, couldn't really say no. Having previously attended to the owner's E36 compact on camera, was interested to learn how this humble 155 twin spark compared, and while at a casual glance it didn't look particularly dirty, its wheels, boxy body and poverty spec plastics were in need of at least a good wash following a bit of wet gravel path off-roading. So went ahead and filled my buckets up in preparation for just that, but not before committing to grabbing some grimy intro shots for you. So with the lower half of the car being the muckiest, it made sense to get stuck into that first, starting with the dry splattered wheels and arches, which were generously sprayed over with a diluted secret concoction I was testing via my Turtle Wax Ultimate Foaming Pressure Sprayer that I anticlimactically prefer to use in non-foaming fashion, before being thoroughly rinsed out and off with the old Kranzle at reduced pressure once it had had a minute or so to soak, as despite being recently wax oiled and as watertight as a widely windowed car can be, still didn't want to hydraulically pummel 30 odd year old parts at full whack if I didn't have to. After being pre-cleaned, the faces of the pepper pot style wheels as well as the chunky tyre walls were treated to some potent Reactor or wheel cleaner, which Turtle Wax have kindly kept me in complimentary supply of for a while now, allowing it to do its active chemical thing to any unseen stubborn contamination on the surface for a minute or so afterwards. Before then going on to work everything over with a few different shampoo primed brushes, partly to help neutralise that a bit, but also to ensure everything was lubriciously dealt with in a physical manner. And it was a good job the rears of these wheels weren't really accessible for cleaning, as my easy detailed brush, which is generally what I reach for when cleaning wheel barrels, was all but ready for the bin. But that didn't mean the face, tyres and arch liners couldn't be adequately dealt with, so spent 5 minutes or so on each corner with a standard bristled detailed brush, a super soft example, a mini wheel Woolie, a Viking transport item and an easy go bog brush as I like to call them. Once sufficiently scrubbed, the wheels and arches were then thoroughly rinsed off to remove the shampoo suds, potent chemical residue and loose dirt, which was a pretty straightforward affair, but one that needed doing nonetheless to ensure these areas wouldn't be harbouring unsightly splatter come aftershock time. wheel cleaning out the way, it was then the turn of the oblong 90s body to be pre-cleaned. So went ahead and treated the lower half of it as well as a few other spots where dirt tends to accumulate to a dousing of the same all-purpose cleaner used earlier, as it seemed to do a decent enough job on the splattered wheels and arches, before immediately coating that and the rest of the car over with some attention-seeking and, as far as I'm aware, now discontinued pink jelly bean snow foam via my compact but apparently pretty leaky ultimate snow foam cannon from Turtle Wax, as the only other foaming product I had to hand was a protectant-infused formulation which is designed to be used after the car's been thoroughly contact cleaned. And while foam alone won't do a great deal of dedicated cleaning, when used in combination with a stronger chemical can help to keep that active on the surface for a few minutes longer, so generally makes sense to blanket things over one way or another, especially for cars you've never personally cleaned before, even if that does mean creating a pool of low-lying lather that will serve to thoroughly soak your mesh trainer-clad feet for the rest of the day. So after a few minutes of sunny September soakage, the foamy suds and filmy pre-wash underneath were thoroughly rinsed off with the washer, specifically from top to bottom, just to annoy the bogey-eaters that like to do it from bottom to top. Again at slightly reduced pressure to avoid unnecessarily driving pink tinted water into areas it wouldn't be welcome. Trying to be as methodical as I realistically could be to ensure as much loose dirt was removed from the surface as possible before any physical contact was made. Finishing up with a gentle rinse of the door shuts, as I wouldn't have time to treat them to a dedicated detail, but still wanted to make sure that they were mostly free from any obvious loose dirt. With the aging Alfa now thoroughly pre-cleaned, I could go ahead and safely get hands on with a microfiber mitted wash using the last bit of lemon curd like Meguairs Wash Plus shampoo I had on me, which I thought would be better at preparing an old car like this for a subsequent protective spritz than, say, a slick maintenance shampoo. And with the paintwork being a swirl concealing silver that was already sporting its fair share of cosmetic war wounds, deemed a large single grit guarded bucket and freshly washed plush mitts suitable, as the vast majority of potentially abrasive dirt was likely already gone. And with this being the car's last contact wash for probably quite some time, was happy to treat its 33-year-old surfaces, which to be fair were originally designed to be used and not overly coddled, to a decent hands-on scrub, working at a fairly swift pace to try and avoid streaks, but not so swift that areas were overlooked, which I guess only really comes with the experience of having cleaned a load of different cars against the clock. While this wasn't a mega in-depth multi-stage decontamination, I did go ahead and tickle a few fiddly areas that the wash mitt alone might have struggled to adequately access over with a soft shampoo primed brush after they'd been retreated with the stronger pre-wash. But in all honesty, there wasn't many parts of the car that really required a targeted clean, which was impressive considering its age. But either way, once I felt that all exterior surfaces of the Twin Spark had been acceptably seen to in some sudsy way, shape or form, went ahead and thoroughly rinsed it off from top to bottom one last time at half whack before the chalky abrasive suds had the chance to stain, in preparation for a pre-winter storage towel and blow dry, ensuring it was only really fresh rinse water left on the surface and not soap or encapsulated dirt. And while some might say you shouldn't really repeatedly pressure wash an Italian car of this age in an up close and personal fashion, the 155 seemed to weather the storm just fine, proving to me in the moment at least you very much can. Now, although I'd be blow drying the wheels, tyres, cracks and crevices, did opt to towel dry the more accessible parts of the body with a soft reservoir item from MCR. Again, in a fairly hands-on fashion, as unlike the day before when having to dry my own twice due to infuriatingly timed rain showers. There wasn't any on the horizon here, so I knew I wouldn't be making a load of physical contact in vain. And while I did have a few of these towels to hand in various sizes just in case, this large 90cm jobby was really all I needed to get the vast majority of this lengthy old gondola sufficiently dried off. Once towelled to within an inch of its life, the 155's wheels and tyres were then blow dried off with the Bruhl, utilising just one of its twin turbines, which was more than enough for a quick targeted rinse water removal from these smoothly designed items, whose fairly recently refurbished finish looked great for a good clean and so now just needed encircling with some freshly dressed rubber. But before doing that, the bits of the body that the drying towel alone might not have been able to adequately soak up trapped rinse water from were also thoroughly wafted over in big red sausage style, as the last thing you want to do with a car you're resting up for the winter is leave it full of loose water. After the exterior had been sufficiently rid of standing rinse water, the door shuts were then treated to a thorough towel down, as they too can hold on to their fair share of it, so spent maybe 5 minutes on each one with a few general purpose Versa towels which are perfect for this sort of work, intentionally leaving things wide open to breathe for a while afterwards, as they likely wouldn't get the chance to do that again for a fair few months. And while I could have ideally done with a full-on dedicated detail, this fairly methodical wipe down would at least leave them dry and presentable enough for the dusty garage spiders that would soon be setting up shop. With everything thoroughly washed, rinsed and dried, I got to work with a few different dressings, first spritzing the arch liners over with Cargod's water-based power product, which is ideal for this kind of thing. And while I'd usually do this post-rinse and prior to drying, forgot, so just applied it as neatly as I realistically could here instead to ensure these easily overlooked areas wouldn't let the side down, before moving on to a more dedicated dress of the Tyre walls with the F1 themed ceramic infused armour all stuff I'd bought with my own penny sweet money a while back, but I'd only really had the chance to indirectly feature in a quick music video. Slapping a fair bit of that over the Alfa's chunky tyre walls with a flat Swissfax brush and letting it self-level while I went on to dress the next one, so that by the time I returned to buff it over it had a good few minutes to soak in. And while you could argue that tarting up something like tyres before hibernating a car for the winter is a bit pointless, I'd say for the few minutes it takes it's almost always worth it, especially for older or less showy cars where technically every little helps. But either way, once thoroughly brushed over, finished up the rubber replenishment with a general purpose microfiber buff back to leave slightly less of a synthetic showy finish and a bit more of a subtly refreshed one. While I was planning to then go on to spritz the paintwork with a superficial protectant, it didn't look too bad in its freshly washed state, so having just finished dressing the tyres and only really having time to tick one more thing off the list, made the executive decision to extend that form of replenishment to the decades-old unpainted plastic bumpers, which I reckoned would add more to the finished Alfa article than marginally improved paintwork would, so utilised Blask's liquid gel-like Tyre Perfect product, which again was something I've only used on camera once before, to breathe a bit of life back into these plastics which weren't terribly faded but still looked a bit flat, so brushed and spread some of the greasy feeling stuff over their surface, mostly with a microfiber applicator which served to simultaneously dress and finesse, eliminating for the most part the need for a subsequent buff. Although dressings like these are only a temporary fix, a more permanent solution like a pigmented product or ceramic coating would really call for a video of its own. But with the car going on to be kept undercover, this stuff shouldn't be weathered away anytime soon, so was happy to expend what little energy I had left at this point to get it boxed off. Unlike during the dark £20 valet days of old, where poverty spec Ford KA bumpers would inevitably turn blotchy the second I'd finished treating them. So for the sake of a free pre-hibernation scrub, figured that was probably enough for the old Alfa, even if its interior was still screaming out for a similar session. As despite having been treated with essentially a random mishmash of products, still looked perfectly presentable for a 30-odd-year-old motor, which interestingly served as the base for the high-revving V6 four-wheel drive touring car I'll always have a soft spot for after its inclusion in the early Gran Turismo games, so it was good to get to grips with a 155 for the first time knowing that. But either way, it was time for me to wrap things up for the cleaning here and leave you with some seamlessly stitched together aftershots to give you a decent idea of how it turned out, as well as to say thanks for watching.